The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
This episode of the Charlotte Ledger Podcast is presented by Child Care Search. Finding childcare is more than checking a box. It's peace of mind. For over 40 years, Child Care Search, a service of Child Care Resources Incorporated, has helped families find safe, nurturing, quality childcare options. Their free referral service connects you to licensed programs that fit your family's needs. Visit findchildcarenc.org or call 1-888-600-1685 to talk to a child care navigator today. Hey, it's Cristina Bolling from the Charlotte Ledger, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. Today, we've got a podcast episode for the book lovers. Joy Callaway is a Charlotte native who is one of the region's best-known historical fiction authors. She's got 7 books under her belt, 6 of which are in the historical fiction genre and are set in places you might have heard of, like the Grove Park Inn in Asheville and the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. Joy has not 1 but 2 new books coming out this spring. One set at an Army camp called Camp Greene that was here in Charlotte during World War I, and her first contemporary romance book that's set in a fictitious North Carolina town but was inspired by some places around here, like Renfro Hardware and Matthews. I sat down with Joy recently at a local library of all places to talk about how she's made the leap from a marketing background to becoming a novelist, her love of the research that's involved in writing historical fiction, and how she draws inspiration from her own life and what's around her. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Well, Joy, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today.
I'm really excited to be here.
I wanted to talk to you about 2 books that you have just coming out right now, The Star of Camp Greene, which I have a copy of right here next to me, and Sing Me Home to Carolina. So I want to hear about those and also about your life as a writer, the way you root your novels so deeply in places, and also like how you do your research for historical fiction writing. So I wanted just to hear first about how you got into writing. I had read that you were a marketing director for a wealth management company in your past life.
Yes.
So I wanted to hear, how do you go from, a career like that into writing? Did it happen? Was it an evolution, or how did that all come to pass?
Well, it all started, I think a lot of us authors have similar stories. Some don't, but a lot of us do. In that we loved story from a really young age. So we were people who read a lot as kids. We were people who were often dropped off places like the library, or got to spend time in a lot of places like libraries and bookstores, and then wrote a lot. Once you start reading, I think you started getting entranced by the idea that you can make up worlds with words, on a page, and get kind of transfixed by that. So with me, I grew up here in Charlotte. Actually, I'm a native Charlottean, and my mom was an educator, and my dad, believed obviously very strongly in literacy and reading and how important that was for any career field you went into. So my mom and dad actually read us out loud the classics. So it was like, Secret Garden, Little Women, Black Beauty, Black Stallion, all those, like Treasure Island, all these amazing stories that are now, classics, obviously, because they had really great language, and they thought that if they read them out loud to us, that like our vocabulary would be really good. So that was one piece. And then I also think we were also not allowed to watch TV as kids. Mm-hmm. So we were allowed to watch 30 minutes a week, which nowadays I'm like, that isn't such a small amount of time. And otherwise, we just weren't allowed to say we were bored either, or we got chores. And so we learned how to occupy ourselves and kind of get around the chores. And so my brother got really into sports. So he was a really great basketball player, a great runner. And I ended up just reading a whole lot. And I would write plays, and I would write magazines about various topics. I would sell them door to door in my neighborhood, which was funny. And for like anything, I'd be like, whatever you want to give me. And I was always doing something with like writing or reading. And so as I got older, the funny thing is, I think as we age, sometimes we forget what we loved to do as kids. So I got to high school, and I just remember thinking, I always took like the AP English, AP History, and then regular math. I was like, no thanks on the math. But all I knew as I was graduating high school, going into college, was that I wasn't good at math. I didn't like it. And I wanted to do something with English, with the written word or something like that. And I'm not a good teacher. So I was like, well, teaching's out. What else can I do with this? And so I was exposed to the journalism school at Marsh University. And fell in love with it. So originally I was a print journalism major.
Okay.
And then I had a professor who told me, he said, hey, Joy, I just wanted to be really honest with you about, what your lifestyle will be like if you go into print journalism. He's like, you will move a lot. Is that something you're interested in? You'll have to move a lot to kind of rise up the ranks of newspapers, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was like, I don't know about that. And he said, well, just explore. There's lots of things you can do. If you want to stay in print, great. There's also other options. And so I ended up switching over to public relations, and also because just the creativity behind public relations and pitching different, products or companies to media. Thought it was a great way to kind of straddle the line there. And so, but I kind of forgot, like in college, high school, about creative writing. I took creative writing courses, but other than that, I had really just thought, writing's my strength. Let's do this. And I didn't even consider being an author. Like, it never entered my mind for some reason. And I always read a lot, but it just never really, I never even considered it.
Yeah.
I got married out of graduate school. And once that summer after I got married, I just read an exorbitant amount of books. So many. I mean, I always read a lot, but this was above and beyond. Okay. And I was looking at my bookshelves one day and I was like, oh, like, I think I'd like to try to write a book. And it was just this random thought. But the next week, I sat down and kind of mapped out an outline for a novel that did not become my debut novel. But that was kind of like where it took me and kind of where the first idea to become an author started. But it was definitely not a straight line. And I don't know what it was about me or why I forgot that I loved to write stories, but I did. And I don't know what that's about, but I'm glad I came back to it.
It seems like that happens sometimes where, we're in college or, it's sort of like what we feel like we should do for our career, not necessarily just where our passion lies. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we look at what we loved as kids, and a lot of times we still do love that. And sometimes we just can't see how that feasibly works and rolls into an adult career. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I don't know why I never considered. Maybe it was just that I didn't think I could become an author, that it seemed so far-fetched that it didn't enter my mind, I mean, when I started out, it seemed far-fetched. It's still, sometimes I'm like, do I really do this as a job? It seems kind of crazy that it's happened.
Great. So you're, historical fiction is really your genre. It seems like, although I know that your most recent book is a contemporary romance, which is neat, and I want to get into that. But it seems like places are so key to your novels. What the Mountains Remember is set at Grove Park Inn, right? So a lot that Carolinians will be familiar with. The Grand Design is based in the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. And then one of your most recent ones, The Star of Camp Greene, which just came out this spring, is set here in Charlotte. And I'm wondering, like, when you are conceptualizing a novel, like, how do you choose these locations, or do they choose you? Like, how does that all work?
They kind of choose me. I don't know, like, a lot of my contemporaries, a lot of my author friends, it comes to them from a person first, like a character first. I don't know what it is about me and why. A lot of times it comes from a setting. I don't know if it's because when I stand in certain places or when I'm exposed to certain places, I can feel like the stories around me, or like, I'm interested in who lived there before, or, what that would have been like to experience it. And you can do that through a story. And so sometimes if I get interested in a setting or a place and the people who lived there before, the best way for my nerdy brain to get to experience that is by writing a story about it.
Well, I mean, a lot of work goes into that, too, at the same time, right? Like,
absolutely.
I know that you must spend a lot of hours in libraries. We're sitting in a library right now. I know the Carolina room in the main library has been important to you.
Yes, well, actually, it was under construction. Yeah. It was displaced, like last year when the library was under construction. I actually went to see them, but it was in a temporary location. Yeah. Okay.
Was that for the Star of Camp Greene?
It was.
Okay.
Yes. I was looking for maps, actually, of Camp Greene.
Okay.
They actually don't have them, really. There's one, it's hand-drawn. It's a hand-drawn map of Camp Greene. The reason I was looking for it is because in newspaper archives, it would tell me, I always like to get a really good sense of place, of course, as we talked about, whenever I'm dropping a character into a world. And I was researching, and I was like noticing in newspapers, it would say something like, Charlotteans are able to drive through Camp Greene today, and I'm just making up a street name, but it would be Down Dow Road. Mm-hmm. And I would look at the map of Camp Greene and say, like, well, where is that? Because I don't see a Dowd Road, for instance. And that's really important to me to get a comprehensive idea of what the whole, place that I'm writing about would have been like. So I went to the Spangler Room and asked them, do you have any other maps? Because I see this one that's been, it was in a book. I think it was called, oh gosh, I wish I could remember it now. It's referenced actually in the back of this book that I have here, but it's called The Echo of the Bugle Call. And it was written in the 70s. And it's a really great piece on Camp Greene, but it had a map that was in there. And so I was trying to find out if they had any other maps than just the one in there, and they don't. So I think it was, but I got to see that one in real life. It's massive. It's like the size of this table.
Oh my goodness.
And it was hand drawn though. So
wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about that book.
Okay.
And that book just came out in May, so this spring. Tell us about the book.
So the book, it's set here in Charlotte, as you mentioned, in 1918 at Camp Greene, which is a World War I Army training camp, which I didn't know about at all, actually, until about 10 years ago. I was on a panel discussion with Tommy Tomlinson and Sarah Crosland, both local authors. And Sarah had just put out a book called Secret Charlotte. And I was reading it and realized there was a lot about my hometown I didn't know a lot about. And so Camp Greene was one of those locations that was just a surprise to me. And so the story is set at Camp Greene. It follows a Broadway star named Calla Connolly. And she is on... I'll back up a little and tell you about her backstory. So she is kind of an internationally known Broadway star. When the war breaks out, she's actually in London on the stage performing, and she's with her co-star and actually her fiance. They connect on stage. And when the war breaks out over in Europe, he's called to the front really quickly and he passes away. And so she returns to New York and she throws herself on the stage. And then when America enters the war, she feels like she can't just sit by and do nothing. So she asked General Pershing if she can entertain the troops at the front. That's something that she and her fiance had wanted to do together. And of course he says, absolutely not. We're not sending you over there. And he says, but if you want to try it out, this whole idea that entertaining the troops is, important and important for morale, then we'll send you to the American Army training camps and you can try to entertain the troops there. So she takes it and he says, if that goes well, we'll see about sending you to the front. So when we meet Calla Connolly, she's on stage at the Liberty Theater at Camp Greene. And all the Army training camps had a Liberty Theater, which was kind of a place for entertainment for the camps. And she is feeling really, really ill. Mm-hmm. And so she ends up collapsing, and she's been stricken with Spanish flu. And she's taken to the Army hospital there at Camp Greene. And she's one of the lucky ones. She survives. And however, as she's recuperating, she overhears an Army secret, and she ends up getting stuck at Camp Greene for the remainder of the war, which is the absolute last place she wants to be.
This episode of the Charlotte Ledger podcast is presented by Child Care Search, Charlotte's trusted child care guidance for families. I thought that it was really interesting, just with us having just gone through COVID, and then mm-hmm. I'm beginning the book, and I'm like, I know where this is going.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, my editor, like in my notes, she was like, is this real to Spanish flu, or are these like COVID protocols you just put in here? And I'm like, no, this is what happened with Spanish flu. They did like the masking, the citywide shutdowns, the 6 feet apart, that whole thing. Yeah, very familiar to us these days.
How did Camp Greene come to you to be a setting for a novel?
Well, as I mentioned, I was on that panel with Sarah Crosland and Tommy Tomlinson, and I read Sarah's Secret Charlotte.
Okay.
So this happens to me a lot. Actually, I was interested in writing a book set at Camp Greene from that very moment that I read about it, but I didn't know who the main character was going to be.
Okay.
So I do that a lot, where I'll just kind of like be interested in a setting, a location, or a time period, and I'll stick it in a drawer until a main character comes to me.
Yeah.
And so the minute that Calla Connolly came to me, I pulled it out of the drawer. But it had its challenges, because Camp Greene no longer exists.
Yeah.
And a lot of Charlotteans don't know about it at all.
It was kind of in West Charlotte, right?
It actually stretched from, like west of Uptown,
okay,
all the way into Gaston County.
Wow.
So it was 7,000 acres.
Goodness.
And it was really interesting because at the time, Charlotte was only 45,000 people.
Okay.
And Camp Greene had 60,000 soldiers. So it doubled the size of Charlotte. So a little backstory about that was that when America entered World War I, there were only 133,000 soldiers in active duty. And that's not a lot. And they were mainly like patrolling things in the Philippines, like keeping peace in the Philippines. But when we entered the war, they knew we needed a lot more people to send over to Europe. And so we needed to train soldiers. At the end of World War I, 3 million men and women had served.
Wow.
So it was a lot of people they had to train. And so what they decided to do, they decided to put 32 Army training camps across the country. And cities would really contend for them. They wanted these Army training camps to come in because, of course, the economic boost was wonderful, right? You had all these people coming in. It was great. Charlotte was one of the cities that really, really wanted an Army training camp here. And it was hotly contested. I think there were 4 other cities in contention for the Army training camp. And Charlotte ended up winning because of the climate.
Okay.
Which, funny enough, when Camp Greene was here, it actually ended up being like the worst winter on record.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
the wettest winter on record. So, but it won because of that. Also because we had a great rail system that stretched like all across, connected across the country. They had 2 farmhouses that were actually on kind of like peaks on the land. So it was the Dowd House, which has been renovated recently, actually. I was able to go in there. Rob Presley, he has renovated that, and it's so pretty. It's wonderful. He's done a wonderful job with it. But the Dowd House is actually one of the last remaining places that, existed when Camp Greene did. And then there was another farmhouse, the Sid Alexander House, which is no longer standing. But those are the reasons that we got the camp. But it went as far as, the rifle range was in Gaston County. It was on the Catawba River. So when they had drills, you had soldiers marching literally from, uptown Charlotte to the Catawba River.
Oh my goodness.
It was very far. But Remount Road, that's actually where the horse stables were. So there's some little reminders, I think, of Camp Greene, but it actually was a city within a city. So like I said, it housed 60,000 soldiers. It had a YMCA. It had a bakery, a post office, a library. It had a hostess house, which would have housed, wives and girlfriends and any female, visitor. They housed 190 regimental units there. And interestingly enough, Charlotte's Camp Greene was interesting and different from other camps, Army training camps, because everybody was housed in tents, not in barracks.
Okay.
So they actually had what looked like barracks for mess halls and, shower and restroom areas, but they were housed in 4 to a tent.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was a little, so when you see, there are pictures of it, there's some really great pictures of Camp Greene, and it looks like a tent city because it was. And I wondered often if that actually helped us with Spanish flu.
Okay.
Because we were hit pretty hard, and Charlotte definitely at the time kind of massaged a little bit how many people were infected with Spanish flu. There were a lot, but I do wonder if because of the airflow in the tents, if that might have been a better situation than people that were living in barracks.
Large barracks where men would be side by side.
Yeah.
It's under one roof. Yeah.
So I came to Camp Greene obviously through Sarah Crosland's book, but I was quickly really fascinated by it. I think too, because I'm, as I mentioned, a lifelong Charlottean. However, this doesn't exist anymore. This is I'm writing about my city, but it's a different place than I've ever known.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting. Even uptown, there's some scenes in uptown, and that looked completely different than it does now.
So did you actually go, Camp Greene, like you said, doesn't exist, but I guess you obviously went to the Dowd House, but did you ramble around other areas, that would have been part of it? What was that like?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I drove around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually telling Rob Presley when I went to see the Dowd House, I said, you probably saw me driving around here because I was trying to get my bearings. And I do this all the time. I read about a lot of places that, because I write historical fiction, that either don't exist anymore or don't look at all like they did. The exceptions being the Greenbrier and the Grove Park Inn. They look very similar to how they did back when I wrote about them. But I've written about Gilded Age New York, the Bronx, which they said it was in the country back then. So that's not at all like it is now. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Camp Greene obviously doesn't exist. And then I wrote about a nursery that's my family's a plant nursery. And the Gilded Age doesn't exist anymore either.
Okay.
And so it's an interesting thing to do, to try to recreate something that you can't see except in pictures.
So do you put yourself there physically and kind of try to imagine based on the research that you've done? Okay. Like almost like in a virtual reality world, this is what it looked like, and this is how I'm going to tell that story set here.
Yeah. That's why actually when I was talking about the map and trying to find that's why that was so important to me, because I needed to figure out how my character moved within her area. And I have to. So what I ended up doing is I had the map as I saw it, as we have it, and then I added to it based on pictures and based on what the newspaper archive said about locations of various, places like the YMCA or the headquarters, things like that. And because if I don't have that sense of like place and like where my character's moving, then it's really the reader. It seems really haphazard to the reader, and the reader doesn't get a sense of place. So I have to be able to figure out how to move within, again, a place that doesn't exist anymore. So I rely heavily on photos, old photographs, and newspaper archives to kind of lead me in the right direction.
When you're writing about a place that does exist, like the Grove Park or like Greenbrier, how do you go about that? Do you camp? I would love to think like, oh, you'd camp out for a summer at the or at the Grove Park Inn. That sounds dreamy, but
that'd be nice.
How do you do that?
Well, those two places, I have a long history there at both of those places as far as going. We used to go a lot with my family. Excuse me. We used to go a lot growing up with my family there. And so I feel like I know a lot of the places like the back of my hand, However, even writing about the Greenbrier, let's take that for instance. I mean, Dorothy Draper decorated it one way. And it's pretty similar to how it was back then. However, Mr. Varney, her protege, added to it and tweaked it a little bit. And so there's certain spaces that aren't the same as they were. And so it's trying to find, again, those like archival pictures and things like that. The Grove Park is pretty much looks the way it did.
Okay.
I mean, the wings are different.
Okay.
So if you take those off, then you don't think
the
about
original
those.
structure there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The original structure. And because they've kept it the craftsman style.
Yeah.
They've maintained that really well. And so that's like stepping back in time, and so is the Greenbrier. So it's nice in a lot of ways. I was able to envision those books really easily because first of all, I'd grown up seeing these places, but also when I stepped on to these like campuses, I guess you could say, during and after I was writing the books, it was great to realize that like even when I was home here in Charlotte writing, I was getting it right because I could see it in my head. Yeah.
I read a piece that you wrote recently for Garden and Gun magazine about the latest book, which is not historical fiction.
Yeah.
Sing Me Home to Carolina. Mm-hmm. Is that your first book that is not historical fiction?
It is. Yeah.
Published. Okay. And what I liked about that essay that you wrote was you talked about Renfro Hardware, which I also love in downtown Matthews.
Yes, it's such a treasure.
Yeah, and making the town in Sing Me Home to Carolina is a fictional town, right? But putting kind of that very real place as a character almost in that book. And I'm wondering what that process is like as a writer in terms of picking out a place to root a book that, and fictionalizing it. How that came out.
Writing a book, no matter what, whether it's historical or my new rom-com, it's a collage, right? It's taking inspiration from things you love and kind of, hopefully things you love actually, because that's when writers write what they love, it comes out the truest, I believe, and making them into a story, a really interesting story. And for me, with Renfro, my story, Sing Me Home to Carolina, it's about an event planner who comes home to a fictional town. And her parents have been farming their whole lives, and they're farming actually most recently on a historic peanut farm, which was the founder of the town's farm. And it's infertile, and her parents don't know what to do. And so she's trying to help them out. And so initially she thinks she's going to start a wedding venue in the historic barn. And the weddings don't go quite as she planned. They're a little bit let's just say
not the knot.
They're a
wedding
little bit
fails.
Rougher. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so by a series of events, they end up actually hosting the Founders Day party in the barn, and a musician gets discovered there. And so word gets out, and the barn ends up being sort of like a Bluebird Cafe, like a Nashville Bluebird Cafe, which for those of you who are listening who don't know what that is, it's a listening room in Nashville where songwriters and musicians come, and sometimes it's kind of a known place that people sometimes get discovered. And so this barn ends up being kind of that, but here in the Carolinas, so people come flocking to it. And all the while, my main character is navigating the competing affections of her first love, this MLB standout who's back in town after a career-ending injury, and then the mysterious owner of the local hardware store. The hardware store like Renfro, basically. I love old hardware stores. It's one of those, that piece was, I knew, like when you walk into Renfro, it's the heartbeat of the town. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that experience in my fictional town because I felt like that was so important. And also, I just would love to live in Renfrew. I mean, can I get a room in there and just like hang out forever?
With the seeds
Yeah.
and the chickens and the, yes, exactly.
I love it.
Do you see more contemporary romances in your future? Did it feel, what was the feeling like to write that book versus historical fiction?
So with historical fiction, there's always this sort of pressure, I guess you could say, to make sure you're getting the history right. However, of course, I love it. I will never not write historical fiction. It's kind of just my bread and butter, like what I always gravitate toward. It's fun too, of course, but writing this rom-com was like eating dessert for me, I guess you could call it. As a reader, I read historical fiction and I read rom-coms and like fun things. Yeah. And this book, writing Sing Me Home to Carolina, it made me laugh so hard. And I tell people all this all the time. I'm like, look, y'all might not share my sense of humor. Maybe you won't laugh as hard as I did. But when I was doing edits, I think I'd read over this one section probably 8 times. And my husband walks down the stairs and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like crying. I'm laughing so hard.
You packed yourself up.
At myself. Yeah. So it was just a gift. And I hope to write both genres. That's like my ideal.
Does one happen faster than the other? Is it?
Yes. The rom-com happens a lot faster because, unless you're writing a real town, you're making it up. So I basically, Mountain View, which is my fake town, is pretty much what I'd like to see if I could live in a small town. And I could, it has its flaws, but the people are fun. And it's a community, a really great community. And that's kind of what I wanted to create there. So yeah, I would say it's easier because I can just kind of make up as I go what the town's like, what the people are like. They're all fictional.
Yeah.
I mean, they're inspired, at least. They might be inspired by real things, but they're all fictional. Versus historical, I might write fictional characters even, or maybe my main characters, even if they're biographical, like real life characters, they might have elements of fiction in them because I'm telling a story first and foremost, but they're very, very rooted in history and in real life. I have a major issue personally with deviating tons from a person's real life record if I know it. I talk a lot about how when I do historical talks, how I'll take a historical record and people always say, well, how do you balance fact and fiction? And I'll say, I take the record. And if like any of us, if we went on Ancestry and we looked at our family tree, for instance, you're going to see birth dates, you're going to see if they had children, you're going to see maybe what they did for a job and when they passed away. And that's pretty much it. There's going to be a lot of holes, right, in their record. So we take a historical record, we look at like what happened and the characters involved. And what I do is I fill in the holes with fiction. And so I tend to do that. So it definitely takes a lot longer for me to build the world when it's a real life place, when these things really happened, when I'm dealing with real people, than it is me just kind of, now obviously there's plotting involved in both and making sure your characters are like fully formed and like you feel like you could meet them on the streets. You know what I mean? You want to be able to feel like they could walk off the page. But as far the historical research just adds so much time and so much meticulous, care. So.
Do you ever work on 2 projects at the same time? Like these 2 books are coming out so good. Like it blows my mind to think you have these 2 books coming out so closely together. Did you work on them? Was there any overlap there or?
No.
Okay.
Actually. Okay. Because when I'm in a character's head, I'm in their head.
Okay.
And these characters are so different, especially with the historicals. I like to be, of course, I'm not like living back in 1918 the whole day. I have a family, I have kids to hang out with, so I'm not fully immersed in that. But when I'm writing, I am. And I'm in that character's headspace and I'm living in that era. Okay. And so if I was to then switch over and write something contemporary, the voice would not be as authentic, I don't think. Mm-hmm. So I focused solely on one project and then I'll get done with that. Or temporarily done with that, and then focus on the other project. So what happened with these 2 books was I did a bunch of research in the summertime for Star of Camp Greene, and I started writing late August, and I wrote that book from August through December.
Okay.
And then I had a draft done. And then over the holidays, I switched gears. I gave myself about a 2-week break and kind of cleared my brain out. And then I switched over to Sing Me Home to Carolina, and I wrote Sing Me Home to Carolina from January through April.
Wow. So you're a fast writer.
I am. I've gotten a lot faster over the years.
So you are promoting right now these 2 books, right? What's any good? I always love to ask authors about any good tales from the tour. How far are you doing a lot of traveling with this one?
Yes.
Okay.
So the funny thing is I didn't intend to have books out this close together,
Okay.
but Star of Camp Greene is with HarperCollins and Send Me Home to Carolina is with PRH, like Penguin Random House. And so originally it was supposed to be May for Star of Camp Greene and September for Send Me Home to Carolina. And I was like, okay, that's manageable. Months in between, fine. I was actually heading to the golf tournament last year, walking on, and I got a call from my agent and she said, hey, how do you feel about 2 tours in 2 months? And I said, really? And she said, yeah, they want to make, these are both books that the publishers both think will be great for summer reading. We want to capture that. So are you up for it? And I was like, I guess, but as a parent, like this is the craziest time of year.
Right. And your kids are how old again?
They're almost 12 and almost 10.
Okay.
So this it's 5th grade and 4th grade. Yeah.
Spring is a lot.
It's crazy. Yeah. So I ended up touring 2 weeks for Star of Camp Greene, and then I'll tour 2 weeks for Send Me Home to Carolina. But I haven't had any crazy tour experiences this time. I have, though, before. I did the craziest tour stories are always, I did Costco signings for my first book. It was in Costco's nationwide. And I had, at the same signing, someone come up to me and say that they had seen mermaids and that they were real. And that telling me they were going to write a book about it. And if I stole their idea, they were going to sue me. And then probably about 30 minutes later, someone came up to me and told me their UFO stories and said they were going to write those. And also, I can't take their idea.
Oh my goodness. So you've been warned.
I can't write about mermaids or UFOs, guys.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about your process, and good luck with the writing of the next 2.
Thank you.
The Charlotte Ledger podcast was produced by Lindsay Banks. To learn more about the Charlotte Ledger or to subscribe to one of our newsletters, visit thecharlotteledger.com. This episode of the Charlotte Ledger podcast is presented by Child Care Search, helping families find safe, quality childcare with free referrals and support every step of the way.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.